I write sci-fi so the lambs stop screaming. No, in reality, I guess I like science fiction because of the freedom of it. That it's completely liberating. It's completely unconstrictive. If I wanted to write some story that's set on a planet or a POV that's from an alien or some sort of futuristic world that's dealing with some weird supernatural or mythological circumstances, I can do that. I mean, I don't think any other genre, except obviously fantasy and science fiction and fantasy, are close cousins anyway. I don't really think there's any other genre or style of writing that allows for such freedom and such dynamic storytelling.
Hello and welcome to the special author Q&A for FanFiAddict. I'm Frasier Armitage, sci-fi author and reviewer for FanFiAddict.com, and joining me today is a very cool author. He kind of takes subgenres and just throws them out the window because his sci-fi is so brilliantly blended together in the perfect cocktail in Stormblood and Blindspace. I can't wait to speak to Jeremy Szal. Hi Jeremy, how are you today?
Not too bad. It's 9:30, and I just got off having about 5 beers with Richard Swan. Richard, if you're watching this, you owe me a beer. So yeah, it's all good. Other than
You're
Richard didn't owe me a beer, it's everything's great.
Great, you're perfectly warmed up for this then. That's fantastic. That's great. Um, let's for anybody that doesn't know you, Jeremy, let's start out by just introducing them to you. What makes you want to write sci-fi?
I write sci-fi so the lambs stop screaming. No, in reality, I guess I like science fiction because of the freedom of it. That it's completely liberating. It's completely unconstrictive. If I wanted to write some story that's set on a planet or a POV that's from an alien or some sort of futuristic world that's dealing with some weird supernatural or mythological circumstances, I can do that. I mean, I don't think any other genre, except obviously fantasy and science fiction and fantasy, are close cousins anyway. I don't really think there's any other genre or style of writing that allows for such freedom and such dynamic storytelling. And so, yeah, it's naturally comes to me. I think the question would be more, why wouldn't you write science fiction? Because that's just where the freedom is, and freedom is why I write.
I love that answer. Like, why write sci-fi? Why wouldn't you write sci-fi? That makes so much sense to me. That's perfect. Your books, as I've alluded to already, are so filled with sci-fi. I absolutely love them. Stormblood, Blind Space. Um, tell us a little bit about the books and what people can expect from them.
Yeah, sure. They're basically space opera slash space punk slash military sci-fi books with a character-driven, morally grey bent to them. Um, they're about the protagonist is Vakov, who has Stormtech in him, and Stormtech is the DNA of an extinct alien race that gets used as a drug and makes people get high on adrenaline and aggression. And when he got sent off to war to fight a really brutal empire, and when he came back, he found that his squad mates were being murdered, and that his estranged brother, was the prime suspect. And so it came a lot about the conflict. Core conflict of the book was the being torn between the bonds that he'd formed during this war, the brothers that he'd made, and his actual flesh and blood brother, and the complications and the expectations and the difficulties that come with it, being torn between honor and loyalty, between your blood or someone that you've lived with and someone that you've forged a friendship with, forged in fire and brimstone because of the hell that they went through and the complications that come with that when one is pitted against the other. And I just basically wanted to explore what it would be like to deal with that incredibly difficult emotional situation while also having a alien drug in you that made you want to bash that guy's head in because it would literally give you an adrenaline boost that you would need to get out of this sticky situation. And so I think the story kind of took a life of its own from there, and it grew and it grew, and it became a space opera, and it became more of a intergalactic story, interstellar story with lots of colonies and aliens and spaceships and factions and that sort of thing, but still retain that core dynamic of character-driven nature, and these people being put in situations where there's sometimes no right answer, or there's no true way out of a situation when it becomes, choosing between, again, your blood or the friends that you've made that have become your family.
Yeah, and when you're writing these predicaments that you're throwing Vakov into, are you ever sort of sat behind your laptop, sort of like, do you ever feel sorry for him? Because he goes through so much in these books. It's
He does
absolutely
it to
brutal.
himself, Fraser. He does it to himself. um yeah, sometimes I do. I mean, I'm currently wrestling with that with Wolfskin at the moment. There's one scene where I'm like, ooh, should I do that? Should I? And the answer is probably yes. Sorry, Vakov, but the answer is probably yes. But for me, it's not really just about throwing them through hell. It's also about what comes out the other side. What if you put them in this? What is the natural emotional arc of this? And it's easy to very slip into, oh well, I need this character to always have a can-do attitude, and this is, we've got to push on and we've got to follow the narrative because this is what protagonists do, and that's obviously very true. But at the same time, I think that is a little bit too easy, and for me, I prefer to try and follow the not harder part, but the more the simple yet the simple and yet true path where, if they go through a situation like that and they, for example, go through something extremely difficult emotionally, do they become bitter? Do they become angry? Do they become resentful? Do they become someone who says, "No, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I've had enough. I'm sick of being the good guy. I'm sick of being the one that's always sticking his neck out." And there are situations in the first book, without spoiling too much, where at one point Vakov gets mistreated horribly, both physically and emotionally. And at one point, he's like, "Screw it. I'm not going to be the good guy here anymore. I'm going to go out on my own terms. I'm going to find the information I want. I'm done with it. I'm done." And it was important that that scene existed because it allowed the character to just be, rather than saying, "Oh, no, 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 he's got to do the right thing. He's got to always push up against the darkness within him," or that he's always got to do the right thing, the hard thing. And sometimes because in real life, we don't always do the right thing. We don't always do the hard thing. Sometimes we go for the easy the easy thing, or not always the easy thing, but the less obvious choice that is we're going to have to pay for later. But at the meantime, we're forced to emotionally invested in this moment, and we're like, "No, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to say this thing. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to, go down this path, even if I regret it later. This is how I'm feeling now, and I'm going to act on it." And so that's kind of where a lot of Vakov's decisions are made.
Yeah, and it's so appealing to to be reading about a character like that who is, you're questioning the choices that he's making the same way he is. And this, like, the lines between good and bad and right and wrong and hard and easy are kind of blurred. When it comes to writing a character like that, how do you go about doing it? Because I when I was reading the books, I was rooting for Vakov the entire time, despite what he was doing, no matter what he was doing. So, do you have to like draw boundaries with it, or do you just sort of, are you always looking at the character and what they would do, and is that your like guide through it, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, yes and no. I am. There are things that I've said, yeah, I'm probably not going to make him do that. And there was something in book two where I was like, yeah, I think that might be a bit too far. But in that case, I think it was more about his motivations for doing what he was doing and what was actually behind the reasons, what was behind his reasoning. And so I think that as long as I'm able to have a solid enough reasoning, and that I'm able to prove to both to the audience and perhaps for Vakov to prove to himself, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think I can get away with it, or at least Vakov thinks he's getting away with it. It's not. He doesn't always, but it's, yeah. Again, it's more about the character remaining true to himself, and me as a writer remaining true to the character. It might be very easy for me to say, "Oh well," and now I've got to, go down this path because the character has to stick to these sets of rules, or has to remain within these boundaries. and I'm not really sure if readers can tolerate this. But I think in that spur of the moment, because I write from a stream of consciousness style, and by that I don't literally mean, it's just one unfiltered street block of text where it's just the characters rambling on and on. I mean that in the sense that I'm writing, I guess, from a narrative consciousness where, as pretentious as it may sound, where all the things that the character is doing, saying, doing, acting on, believing, thinking comes from how he's feeling in this moment, in these circumstances, and it continues on from there. Obviously, there are narrative constraints due to the plot, but yeah, I do try to keep it pretty much focused on what he's thinking now, what would he do now, and what is he trying what is he trying to accomplish. Like, there's one thing in the start of book 2 where he's just interrogating this one of the bad guys, and what he does is, I think, like, he shoots him in the knee, I think, or something like that, and afterwards he just, like, the guy is like non-responsive, and he just like kicks him in the wound and says, like, tell me, where are they? And I had a lot of readers saying, oh man, he's really taking it to the next level. He's really going for it. And then afterwards, the Vakov told the guy, if you tell me where I need to go, the information I need, I'll let you go. And the guy tells him, and afterwards he's like, yeah, okay, thanks for the information. And he just takes him on his wounded knee, strings him up, and just leaves him hanging upside down. And he just walks away, leaves him there, and tells the guy's boss that he helped him out. And I had people say again, man, he's really going for it. Like, he's not holding back. And it's not that I was trying to be edgy or trying to be, again, I wasn't trying to be edgy, but I was thinking of what would he do in this moment? He's desperate. He's angry. He's determined. I don't think he would let him go. I don't think he would walk away. I think he would take this risk. And even knowing that that's a sort of, it might, degrade him morally, and it might not be something that his allies approve of, I have to stay true to the character in this moment. And part of being true to that character means putting him in difficult situations and seeing how he can grow and evolve. Because he can't just be a wrecking ball for 600 pages. As easy as that might be to write, he has to learn and adapt, and to look at the situation and think, okay, I might have done this at one point. Now I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to learn and evolve, not just for me, but for my friends. How can I do this? How can I grapple with this while staying true to myself, while still being who I am? This might be a long-winded answer, but I was talking about this with someone the other day, and you see a lot of in fiction protagonists who do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Because they have to save the city, especially in superhero fiction. They have to save the city, they have to rescue the person, they have to, go on this mission, this quest, because it is a morally upright thing to do. It's their journey. They have to fulfill it because it's the right thing. But I think what's more interesting is that a protagonist who does the right thing, not because it's the right thing, but because to not do it would be to be a betrayal of the self, to betray who they are, and to see someone being mugged, or see a gross tragedy taking place or something like that, and to walk. They don't get involved because, they're trying to be a vigilante, but to walk away and sleep at night would violate their principles and would violate the sort of person that they grew up to be, and it would contradict the manner in which they've built their ethos. Like, they've built the personality around being this person and trying having this perspective, this outlook on life, and they've this is what they do, and this is the way that they see the world, and this is the way that they think the world should be, they go and respond to it, not because, again, it's the right thing to do, but because, this is who I am, and I'm going to fulfill that. And I think that makes for a more interesting character. Obviously it's not one or the other, it can be both, but in Vakov I try to have him as a character. He does what he does, not because, if I don't, who will, but also because this is who I am. This is what I am, a man who is aggressive. I'm a man who goes looking for a fight, and I know that if I sit back and let someone else do this job, even if they could do it, I'll never forgive myself. And this is my nature, for good or bad.
Yeah, it's kind of like the difference between like a hero going on a journey and a genuine hero's journey. It's like,
Mm,
you, you've
exactly.
you've
Yeah.
you've got a character who is growing, and that arc is so much more satisfying than just a character who is sort of going, oh, okay, I'm now in this situation. It's really really compelling as a reader to read Vakov and his journey, and it does feel like a heartfelt growth across the books. So, but before we get into the deeper aspects of Vakov and who he is and all of these kinds of things, the book is also stacked with all of that cool like action and all of the cool stuff. So it's not just the emotional depth you get, but you
Mm,
also get a lot of the flashy coolness that sci-fi so
mm.
often is attached with. And one of those things is his suit. And I was wondering, like, if you had Vakov's suit, what would you do with it?
His armor. Well, uh, not sure. I think I just walk around the city or walk around these places with the helmet on, just for the badass feeling of knowing that I can see everyone and they can't see me, and that I'm just armored in this big hunk of metal and tech, and then I can just barge people out of the way. I guess I'd also take it for a flight, like do like an Iron Man, and just go around all the mega towers of the world and just start going like a rocket over these locations, like basically become one with the air, with and the birds. I'll probably get shot down at some point as well, but because it's Vakov, he would find a way. If I was Vakov and I had the suit, I'd find a way to escape and probably use the rocket to, catch a ride on it or something. But yeah, yeah, definitely put that good suit to good use. I'd probably wreck it before too long, like Vakov does. But yeah, you can probably tell reading that book that I have a fond affection for Artma, and since the book's are writing in first person, it's kind of fun to almost like not cosplay, but to almost become one with Vakov as he's wearing the armor. It's quite fun to write, as you can
Yeah,
imagine.
and it's fun to read. It's great. The Okay, so you mentioned Iron Man, so let's just do like a little bit of a sort of like Vakov versus Iron Man. Who's coming out of that fight?
Well, Vakov's got alien DNA in him, so sorry, Tony Stark, you're going down. Sorry,
I love
Gwyneth
it.
Paltrow. You're gonna
Yeah,
have to go back to filling Goop. You're not
yeah,
gonna be his mistress anymore.
yeah. I love it. I love it. If it had been Vakov against Thanos, easy. They wouldn't
Yeah,
have needed the entire sort of like that whole end game. Just done, sorted.
as long as Vakov had Juvens, then
Yeah,
Thanos would be toast.
yeah. I love
He
it.
wouldn't even tolerate him. He'd just gore Thanos through the heart and be done with it. Like
Yeah.
I'm sick of this purple bastard. Let's go home.
I love it. I love it. In terms of like the alien DNA, this is
Hmm.
something that I really related to in terms of, I think a lot of people will relate to it. Feeling like uncomfortable in your own skin at certain times in your
Mm.
life. Do you think that Vakov is a good spokesperson for, that he's like a hopeful character for ones who are maybe dealing with that kind of issue and they're looking for characters that are going through the same kind of thing?
Do you mean in like, in what context do you mean? Like, that he's not comfortable with his own skin? Like, because he's basically got an alien invader in him, or because of or because of the person that's made him?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess a little bit about. I guess it's kind of like the more that the book goes on, the more that he is um, sort of affected in a way by this alien tech that is within him, and it's kind of made him the person that he is. Um, but at the same time, he is not. He's kind of like finding himself, and he's accepting himself as to who he is
Mm,
as well in a way.
yeah.
And so that to me that felt very hopeful. So although you've got all of this darkness and this atmosphere, which is really really, really cool to read. I viewed him as kind of like a hopeful character, and I just wondered if that was the way that you saw him.
Yeah, I definitely can. I think the darkness in him comes from two things, and primarily it's because he is an addict. He always will be, and this is not necessarily a spoiler, but he's never going to get rid of the storm tech. There's never going to be some sort of magic cure where it all goes away, and he's this decade long conditioning of that's happened to his biochemistry and his mind. It's not just going to disappear overnight like smoke. Like it's there to stay. What it's done to his mind, his brain, his personality, like it's locked in. And so yeah, that's definitely not going away. But he's also yeah, like he can become dark because of all the things that it's done to him and all the ways that it's affected him, and he's unable to really know, okay, this villain that I absolutely loathe and hate to the point that I can't see straight, this rage that I'm filled with, this like absolute seething loathing that is damaging both me and my personality. And is this something that's because of me, or is it because of the storm tech? Is it because of both? Is it because I allow it to be this way? Am I fighting it hard enough, or am I just kidding myself into thinking that yeah, this is who I am. I've just got to resist it. I don't have any choice, because there's a lot of things in our lives I find, and this is at least true for me, and there's this true for other people that I've noticed. They just kind of accept, oh well, I was born this way. I can't help it. Oh, these are my circumstances. I've always had a temper. I have no control over what I say. Or this is just the condition, the situation that I grew up with, and I've got no choice but to carry it on and continue the cycle of misery. And well, no, that's not always true. There's always a choice. Is it more difficult for certain people than others? Absolutely. Our upbringing and who we are and things that have been done to us and things that we've gone through affect us. What happens to us every day, impacts our personality and our lifestyle and our choices somehow, and often not for the best. But I think with Vakov, that darkness comes in him as well, because he knows that he's full of this hatred and this rage, and yet sometimes he won't get rid of it. And he'll knows that it's self-destructive, and he knows that it's dangerous, and yet he pursues it because he wants to pursue it, and because he knows that it gives him strength and it gives him power. Because he wouldn't be able to accomplish half the things has if it wasn't for rage. Like rage is his fuel. It's his weapon, and he does a lot of good with it. But he also pays the price for it emotionally and mentally. But I think the hope in it comes from the fact that, yeah, he's able to find acceptance. And we will see this you see this in Blindspace a little bit, but you'll see it in book 3 as well, where he starts saying, okay, I am this way. This is the way I am, for good or for worse. These are the worst aspects of my own nature. I've got to fight them one way or another. What's the best way I can manage it? What's the best way I'm able to grapple with this darkness inside me? And what's an avenue I can use to vent it for good? Because one of the things that, again, is in this world is where he has to do a lot of terrible things and horrific things and make horrible, hard decisions, but he has to do them for the greater good. And because that's, the world is full of difficult choices, but he can make those choices and he can do those hard, terrible, aggressive, violent things because of the man he is, because he has these abilities in him, and part of him grows to accept it and to grapple with it. And yeah, I mean, not always. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, because there is I do want there to be a nice element of surprise. But yeah, let's just say book 3 definitely expands on that and takes Vakov to some interesting places. But yeah, I do think that ultimately he is a hopeful character, because he's always at least striving for the light. Like in my world, in my characters, there is hope, there is light, but the characters are going to have to fight for it.
Yeah,
They're going to have
I
to
love
buy
it.
in, and it ain't going to be given to them on a silver platter.
Yeah, and I think that helps. helps all with the relatability to how you, when you're reading the book, you can recognize the world because of that. It might be far future and there might be technology there that we don't have, but you see the world because it's reflective of ours, and it's great. Another thing that I thought was really good about the relatability aspect is you described Bakov as being like an addict. And I think as a writer, I am kind of like addicted to storytelling. I absolutely love writing, totally addicted to it. Was writing this book a little bit like having storm tech? You've got like this idea that's inside of you that just has to sort of find a way to express itself. It takes over your brain. Was that your experience writing it?
The first book, yes, absolutely was. I got this idea in my head. Basically, I'm not sure when. I think it was about middle of 2009, 16, and I just thought, what if we actually all had alien DNA in us? Like, do we upgrade ourselves with alien DNA, and what would be the consequences of that? And not long after that, Vakov was knocking on the door in my brain, saying, "Open up, bastard! I want to write. I want to be your main character." And so I said, "Yes, sir. Any way immediately, sir." And he said, "Shut the hell up and don't call me sir. Start writing." And I did. And yeah, I just remember going to his cafe here in Sydney after a really miserable job interview that I'm very glad I did not get the job for. And so writing page one, chapter one, Vakov completing a heist where he goes with Grim to steal something from the Jackal. And it just grew from there. I wrote it, no pun intended, like a storm. The pages just poured out of me. I just went down on my days off to the little cafe and just wrote. Yeah, I mean, there was very little editing involved. I think like I went back and wrote the flashback sequences afterwards and added some more depth and layer to the relationships between Catherine and Grim and Artyom and all that. But yeah, more or less, like when I was writing it, it just poured out of me because that was just a story that was in me and I just wanted to tell it. And yeah, it came really easily, and it's never happened to me. It's never happened before or since that a book was written that easily. Obviously, it wasn't always sunshine and rainbows. There were difficult bits, as there are with every novel, but yeah, by and large, yeah, it just flowed. Book two was another thing entirely because when you do start writing for a job and you have a contract and expectations, that is a very different thing. So book two was much more difficult, but yeah, it was a new challenge and it was a new story, and I'm very happy with the way it turned out. But yeah, I'd say that at times the universe, it almost kind of does feel like Storm Tech. Like there are days I get where it just flows out of me, and I'm like, "Yep, this thing that we're doing today. We're going to breach a spaceship. We're going to take down this guy. We're going to leap into space, guns blazing." And yeah, it almost like rolls out of me, like yeah. And so I guess that is some sort of addictive storytelling at play, but until I get Storm Tech in me, for sure, I'm never really going to know the difference.
Yeah, that's true. Although whether you would want Storm Tech in you or not, it's the Shania, not something I'd particularly be signing up for. But
Probably
what,
not.
yeah.
Yeah, probably not.
I was thinking about you're saying about the differences between writing book one and book two. I was thinking about you writing a series. I've not written like a full series yet, and but I know how it feels to like write an ending of a book. When
Hmm.
you're looking at across a series, is it like an emotional? Is it similar emotionally, or is it different emotionally to be sort of looking at a series with the idea that you're going to be ending the series and not just ending a book? At some point in the future.
Yeah, it's very different. It's very different because I've been with these characters since I think 2016, as I said, 2016. That was 7 years. I found Vakov when I was in my early 20s, and I'm nearly 30 now. And although I'm not done with him quite yet, and this book definitely won't be the last that we see of Vakov. It will be the conclusion of this story arc, and it will be, for now, the ending. And yeah, it has been emotional, and it is going to be emotional. And I cried when I wrote the ending, and I cried when I wrote the emotional climax for very different reasons. And I won't spoil the emotional climax, but for the latter, like because the book ended the only way it could end. And last few chapters, I was seeing the conclusion of these characters' journey, and I was temporarily, for the first draft at least, having to say goodbye to them. And there will come a point in the near future where I will have to say goodbye to them for good, and that's a very, very different thing. Um, there's always of course, the opportunity where I could just drag it out, write another book and another book after another book. But I think that nature of stories is that that stories end. That's why they're stories, and it's of benefit to have. It's of benefit to have the story come to its natural conclusion, where it ends on a high note, and you're able to say goodbye to this world rather than it dragging out and overstaying its welcome. But at the same time, of course, it's a very emotional, very draining, complicated, messy thing to do. But I've always admired books where I've turned the last page and I've thought I could read another 500 pages. It's ended. It ended where it needed to, and I loved how it ended. I could keep reading, but I'm satisfied with where it ended, and that's what I want to leave readers with. We've gone on this journey. I would love to continue on this narrative, but where we're left with, I'm good. Yeah, and I think I just want to be able to instill that longing for them, because at the end of the day, the world of the common and Vako's world will always exist. People can go back and read it any time. I'll be able to go back and flip through those pages and live through it every time. It will always exist, right? And I think I always will be coming back to it and telling stories within that world. But it is a very emotional journey and arc to go through.
And I love hearing that. When I talk to writers who are writing series, it's amazing how often you hear the expression "it ended the only way it could," and that is always a great sign for me. Because with a book, you can end it. There's multiple endings, but with a series, I think you build to what is the only right ending for a book, don't you? And it's like when you find that, that's when you know I've hit the end. It's great to hear that that's coming, Jeremy. That's brilliant.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
in terms of subversion, this is something I wanted to talk to you about, because the the books are really subversive in the fact that they don't address themes that you would expect them to. Like with Stormblood, I was taken completely by surprise with the way that it looks at the people behind the conflicts and the inhumanity of warfare and all of this kind of stuff. And it wasn't what I expected from a cyberpunk space opera, noir detective story. I was like, it was really subverted my expectation. And I was thinking about, subversive storytelling. Do you find that's compelling as a writer? Is it more interesting, sort of, you know, getting a subversion between theme and genre?
Well, I don't really think I set out to subvert anything. I was just writing the story that I wanted to write, and I was trying to tell this story from a perspective and a place of honesty and authenticity and genuineness. Yeah, I just I wasn't my plan to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to show the horrors of war, the nature of conflict, the nature of violence, and what it does to both people and both planets at large. That wasn't the plan at all. I was just trying to think honestly, what does war look like? What does war feel like? What's it like to be there, boots on the ground, smoke in the air, blood on your nails, gunfire hammering in your ears? And what's it like to be there, and what's it like to carry that with you 10 years in the future? Because ultimately, Stormblood is not a military science fiction book. At least I don't think so. I would classify them as military space opera, or space opera with a military sci-fi bent, possibly. They are far future stories, and it's about what comes afterwards, what happens, once the dust has settled and that new problems have arisen. Because again, without spoiling too much, the core conflict that is within this series arose because of the unresolved conflicts that happened before the books took place, especially if you look at who the villain is in the first book. And so it was my goal to not to say, oh well, this evil galactic empire that's come down, how do we defeat them? It was more about, okay, we've won the war, we've paid the we've you know uh, we've we've completed the mission. What's the bill? Like, what comes afterwards? What are the seeds, the poison seeds that we've scattered to the soil? Like, what thorns are going to blossom now, and what's it going to do to our society, and what's it going to do to people? And I think, yeah, and that was just what I was doing. That's just, I wasn't really trying to subvert anything. I think I've had a few people say that to me, and you can start to say after a while, oh yeah, I was trying to subvert something. I really was trying to be some sort of narrative maverick. This insightful, controversial anarchist of storytelling. But no, it wasn't quite like that at all. Sorry to disappoint you, but if that's a disappointing answer. But no, I was just trying to tell it from a place of honesty and authenticity, and I think that's the most important thing of all. I think you can get very sidetracked into writing what you think you should be writing or what people tell you should be writing, and there's always these, you know, these trends, shall we say, about the sort of thing that's popular and the sort of thing that everyone seems to be reading at the moment. But ultimately, what matters is that when you sit down to write, that you write from the heart and you write what you want to write. And yeah, that's where I was coming from. I didn't grow up reading I think most classic books that others did. Like, I've never read Lord of the Rings, never read Asimov's, never read Clark. I've obviously flipped through them, but I've never, I'm familiar with them, or to a minor extent, but I've never sat down and dug into them, and they were never influential in my storytelling when I was growing up, when I was starting to write. I grew up on George R. Martin, Abercrombie, Ian M. Banks, Lauren Bucas. Who else? Yeah, like I can't think of the top of my head now, but yeah, I think it was more grittier, edgier, darker. People who really subverting the standard expectations, and so I think that's where that's more the well that I drew from.
Yeah, and I think I think that is a brilliant advice for people who are starting out writing and thinking, well, how should I approach it? Writing from an honest point of view, I think it will give you all of those things along with it. Won't it? Was it the same with regard to Blindspace and this idea of brotherhood and that theme being so core to that book? Was that something that just happened organically, or did you set out with that one to be like, right, I want to explore brotherhood in this?
Yes and no. I think I definitely did want to explore it, and it was always a goal and the idea, as it was in the first book. But I think as I wrote the situations where Vakov and his estranged brother Artyom are sitting down and talking to each other, I didn't plan at all. I just let them unfold. I've got these two brothers. They've had a very difficult relationship. They've had a very difficult time. They've gone through hell. The dust has settled a little bit. Where do they go from there? And it just unfurled. It just unfurled. Like, I know that sounds very. It sounds like very whimsical and magical, but yeah, it did really unfold that way. I just thought, what's the honest way I can get these two brothers to communicate and to have a conversation and to kind of unravel all the baggage that's been collecting over the years. And I guess because of that kind of ties into the themes of the grander book about brotherhood and about honor and loyalty and sticking by your friends and sticking by your brothers when times get tough. And I think part of it is not that I was doing this deliberately, but I think that we, as men, are very shuttered emotionally. Like, a lot of men are told to suppress their emotions. Oh, it's not manly, Oh, are those manly tears I see? Oh, come on, man up. And I guess that plays into, or not even plays into, that is toxic masculinity. That is very much a facet of toxic masculinity, when men are told to suppress their emotions, and this myth that having an emotional response, or being melancholy or being sad or being overwhelmed, is something that girls do, or it's a girlish thing. And I think that I kind of wanted to more explore the emotions that men go through, and the difficulties and the traumas and the ups and downs of these emotions that have that are affected with brotherhood and the dynamic and relationships that these brothers have and how it's affected them emotionally over the years. And yeah, because again, we don't see that too often, I don't think. And and I think that I don't think enough men are, at least in fiction, that I don't really think we get to see that too often. Uh, and I think I just kind of wanted to explore that a little bit and to dig maybe a slightly deeper than I was comfortable with initially, because there is a lot of me in these books. Not the whole killing and armor and aliens tech, of course. Like just before anyone thinks my life is that exciting, but the sort of things that these characters deal with, so depression or certain anxieties or certain worries and dreads and feelings of intense emotion or intense hatred or rage. Some of them do come from me. I'm not going to specify which, not right now at least, but some of them do. And I think that part of it was a catharsis for me being able to put it on the page, but I think it's also a bit of a way to explore these in a rich and an honest way, rather than just these characters doing what's right because they have to. It's about them taking the time to sit down and unpack this and unpack themselves, and to let them breathe and let people get to know them.
Mm. I think you're so right about people mistaking vulnerability as weakness, and in your book,
Mm,
part of Vakov's growth is in him appreciating that it's okay to be vulnerable. You can still be strong.
mm.
It's I think that is a really really beautiful thing that you did, and that you will hopefully carry in to Wolfskin as well. Which is, by the sound of it, it sounds great for
Oh,
what's coming.
absolutely.
So when it comes, another really big strength of the book is in its action sequences, and they are so inventive and so imaginative. Are you Do you sort of feel like a pressure to outdo yourself when it comes to the action each time? Because I have no idea how you were able to top the action in Stormblood, but Blindspace somehow managed it.
Yeah, there definitely is pressure. I think that whenever I'm writing a sequence or planning a sequence, I always try to come at it from a new angle. I try to think about it from a physicality or a groundedness that I haven't really done before. So I basically try to think about one thing that the characters are doing, or this one set piece or one situation, and I try to build it up from there, and I try to make it new. For example, in the first book, the characters have to storm a stronghold, but in the second book, they have to storm a stronghold that's on a moon, and they have to go do it stealthily, and then all hell breaks loose, and they have to find a way to escape. But I don't necessarily, while it does get bigger and bigger, obviously, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the ending of the third book has a massive battle sequence that has taken me a long time to plan and get right, and I'm still working on it, and I will still be working on it for some time still. It's not necessarily, you know, without being rude, bigger is not necessarily better. Um, for example, you're talking about, like, for example, an explosion, right? The explosion doesn't always need to be bigger. You could have a small explosion, but if that explosion goes off right next to your ear, then it can feel big. So as long as that sequence is close and visceral and intense and in your face and feels frenetic and feral, um, I think then it works, at least for the characters. Of course, there are also sequences that are very big, and in Wolfskin there are a lot of sequences that are very big, and sometimes it feels like a garden that's just overgrowing. Like I've just gone and planted a few seeds, and I come back the next day, and it's rambling, and there are vines everywhere, and they're sprouting fruit and vegetables, and it's climbing all over me. I'm like, how do I untangle these weeds? How do I get this narrative to work? And so it takes almost these action sequences take off a life of their own, it seems. But yeah, but it's also a fun sort of challenge, fortunately. And yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm trying to make them bigger, but I'm definitely trying to make them more compelling and more visceral and intense with every sequence.
It's they add so much to the pacing of the book. The pacing of these books is absolutely brilliant, because it is just, you strap yourself in and you go, and it never lets up. And yet the both books are very tender, and they're very personal and deep. but you don't feel like it's dragging the pace of the book down. And I think a lot of that is how you structured the action. It's absolutely brilliant. In terms of pacing, is that something that you're aware of when you're drafting, or does that come into things like in the editing phase for you?
Oh no, definitely in drafting, definitely. Like I probably have worried myself sick about the draft, about the pacing and the how many chapters I've had before I've had a really explosive scene. I have learned, or at least I'm trying to learn to ease up on that pressure, because I think that once you've had these characters and you've established your situation, if and you establish the rules, readers, especially when you're in a second or third book in the series, readers are allowed to have a more breathing room, and I think that readers do like a bit of breathing room. And I think in the second book, there's the pacing isn't quite as tight, but that was very deliberately done because I wanted to characters have some room to breathe and to grow, and for us to discover these new characters, especially as there's a few additions to the fire team in the second entry. And it was really nice, I think, to have both as a reader and a writer to have that breathing room to get to know them and to see them respond and adapt in little situations. And that's the benefit of that, is that when the action scenes do happen, they pack an even bigger punch. I think the really good example is in the first season of Game of Thrones, where there isn't really a massive duel between the main characters until Jamie Lannister and Ned Stark face off. They've been building it up every episode, and even in the first episode, they have a little conversation about where Ned Stark says that he never fights in tourneys because when he does face a man, he never wants the other guy to know what he does. And Jamie Lannister says, "Oh, smart man." And you get that tension, and you know something's going to happen, and so that tension builds up, creeping, and then boom! In about episode 5 or 6, the tension hits the boiling point, and all hell breaks loose, and it's jolting, it's vivid, it's shocking, and that's exactly what I want with my action scenes. I want it to feel like a bubble has just burst, and suddenly it's all helter skelter. Yeah, and you don't get that, I don't think, if there's an action sequence every 2 chapters. So when you do get to that moment, I want there to be a real punch.
And it fits so well with your book, with the fact that there is that punch, because that course of adrenaline is mirroring what's happening with Vakov, and it's almost raising the stakes for him because you're going through the same kind of thing, and you're like, oh no, if I'm feeling this, what's he feeling? It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just last thing I want to talk about on these books is the covers, because I feel like I have to talk about the covers because they are just awesome. This is my paperback of Stormblood. If everybody can see that, it is just stunning. This is Blind Space, and again, like they are absolutely incredible. Um, how did you feel when you first saw these images? You know, like an artist who's interpreted your words and your worlds. How can you remember how you felt the first time that you got that file and opened it up?
Oh, I was amazed because I had no idea what to expect. I've never had a cover before because it was my debut series, and yeah, when I first got the cover for Stormblood, I was just blown away. I loved it, but when I got the cover for Blind Space, I was flabbergasted. I just couldn't believe that I was graced with a cover that was that awesome. I had a lot of input with the covers. I was asked to suggest what I wanted to see, and I sent my editor a bunch of images that I was going with, and I was basically it was just a melting pot. I was like, yes, okay, spaceship, gothic city, characters diving down to this gothic city, asteroid field in the background, all wearing armor, really cool, really high tech, and it was almost like alchemy. They just threw it all together and came up with this purple, delightful monstrosity, and I love it. With the third book, the third book's probably the Wolfskin's probably my favorite of the bunch because you've got this massive Gothic cathedral spaceship on it, and I asked for it deliberately, and I asked if you could have the two of the characters on the front cover as well, and I'm in love with it. I am, yeah, really love it. Like it kind of suits the tone of the world as well because the covers are all very gritty and dark and have a sort of sinister edge to them, but they're also very exuberant and expansive, and they hint at a wider world that's happening. And because the Vaco is on every single cover, uh, he's always, this is something I've just noticed, that he's centered in every single cover as well. So it kind of hints that yes, he's situated here as the protagonist, but then you've got this massive world that's almost like blossoming open around him. And yeah, I know I'm gushing, but yeah, I love them. I am especially blessed. And because before anyone thinks I'm pumping up my own ego, I had absolutely nothing to do with the covers. All the credit goes to the team at Black Sheep Studios, who absolutely knocked it out of the park. And I think it's very important that we support human artists and make sure that artwork does not go to other things, and not of the consequences of human jobs. And Black Sheep Studios did an awesome job, did right by me, and I would love to work with them again because these covers are phenomenal.
Yeah, they absolutely smashed it, and you can tell that there is a real love for the source material in the covers,
Mm,
and you can just tell that that's been poured into them because they pop, they're stunning, and they look great on the shelf.
yeah.
With especially with the paperbacks that I've got, they stand out from the rest. They're absolutely brilliant.
Mm.
Um, in terms of like you saying about the first time and being amazed by seeing them, I was just curious, like if there was going to be like an interpretation or like an adaptation of the common series from beginning to end, what would be like your dream scenario? Would it be like a video game or like a movie or a series or a TTRPG or like a graphic novel? In Dreamland, what would you love to see? What's your dream adaptation?
Oh, what's my dream? This is getting some dangerous territory here. If budget was not an issue, and this is my dream, so budget is not an issue. You guys are going to spend your dollars. 100%, I would love an animated TV series in the style of Arcane. 100%. And I say that because not only is Arcane a phenomenal adaptation, it's visually, the textures are gorgeous. It's in Love has been poured into that series in every single frame, and it's just the cinematography, the visual aesthetic, the color grading, the art style. It's just great. It just yeah, I could gush for ages about it. Um, I'm not sure that live action would do it justice, not only because of the, obviously insane budget, but I think that live action might run the risk of watering it down a little bit, and it would either look a little ridiculous, especially the Vakov has this blue stuff in him all the time, so it literally have to probably have something like Avatar, like in him, where he'd have to constantly have this blue stuff running in him, all consistently through like a 10 episode season. Or yeah, and with all the other alien characters and aliens wandering around, there have to be a lot of makeup and prosthetics happening. But yeah, I think, and it would kind of break my heart if it looked like a watered down Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think that there's a lot of amazing work being done in animation, and we've had the Witcher anime, and even with anime over in the Far East, we've got Attack on Titan and Vinland Saga and stuff like that. When we're seeing phenomenal work, and we've also had the Cyberpunk anime, and yeah, I mean, obviously, I've been watching anime for quite a long time, but even now, we're just seeing some phenomenal stuff coming out. But just Arcane, like if I could get a adaptation for the common with the sort of aesthetic and storytelling mechanics of Arcane, I would be in love. I would be a very very happy Australian man if I could have that happen.
So Netflix, wherever you are, make it happen.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. I can see how animated sci-fi. I'm a huge lover of animated sci-fi, and I'm just so happy to hear love for it because it would
Mm.
suit the common so well. Yes, you're so right about what it would bring to the characters and to the world. It would be awesome. I love that.
And I
Um,
think as well because the style of writing that I come from a very tonal quality. Like obviously we have ridiculous stuff happening all the time on the screen, but because yeah, like we have these massive like cities and inside the asteroid, right? And we have all these buildings and crazy clashing colors. I think the animation, it would look gorgeous in animation. It could really give the sense of the craziness and the randomness and the sort of like the patchwork, convoluted nature of Compass. I think would definitely look great in animation. And I think that it's well that because all the characters are so distinct and all the characters physically distinct and have such wild, zany attitudes and personalities and moments of dialogue. I think the animation would be really good in highlighting that. Like in Arcane, you have all these monsters and creatures, and they obviously completely out of proportion with each other, and everyone has wildly different colored hair and body proportions that don't really make physical sense. But that's great because that's the artistic and visual motif that they're going with. And I'm always more interested in that. It's like something that's not quite photorealistic. Like in a video game, I'm not always looking for the photorealistic visual aesthetic. I'm more interested in the more tonal, in something that's a little more interesting tonally, something like Borderlands or God of War, rather than just, something like, I don't know, Call of Duty or GTA. Not that I played either of those, but yeah, you know what I'm getting at.
Totally, and I think that's one of the great things you talked about earlier about why you love sci-fi, and it's that freedom to be able to imagine in anything, and it is such a joy to imagine these stories because
Hmm.
it puts that image in your head, for anybody who's not read Stormblood and Blindspace, you really need to get on it before Wolfskin. It's a stunning series, and I can't wait to see what's coming next. Um, Thank you so much for joining me, Jeremy. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Frasier, for having me on. It has also been a pleasure.
Can just before you go, anybody who's enjoyed this who wants to reach out and contact you and connect with you and everything on your socials, just let everybody know where they can find you.
Sure, I'm not too active on social media at the present time, but when this goes live or wherever you're watching this, I more likely will be. Yeah, at Jeremy Szal on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, although I'm not really active on Facebook. So yeah, feel free to reach out on Twitter or Instagram. And if you go to my website, you can probably just sign up to my newsletter or sign up to my Substack where you'll get free goodies, and you'll be able to keep in touch. And you will also get a free novella called Screaming Blue that is set in the world of the commons. So, yeah, feel free to do, if you want like free stuff, as everyone does, feel free to do that.
Fantastic. That's great. Thank you, Jeremy, and all the best with as you're putting together Wolfskin.